the thing that we focus on primarily is grassland birds, and prescribed fire is a big part of maintaining grassland bird habitat. So one thing I was going to add to what Russell said right at last was that you can go in and graze that with cattle, but the thing is that you emphasize is that you want to give that ground, that burned area or chance to recover. That's that rest, okay? So prior to the end of the growing season. So you don't want to go in every year with your native pasture looking like this into the end of the growing season with your native pasture looking like this road here. So would you agree? So you want to have 6 or 8 inches of stubble height at least left. Give it a chance to recover at least to that stubble height. So anyway, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about wildlife, the impacts of prescribed fire on wildlife or fire on wildlife, and I guess to sum it up in one word, it would be diversity, diversity, diversity. Okay, so in terms of wildlife, we're trying to promote plant diversity across the landscape, and fire is an essential tool to do that. Most of these environments or habitats evolved under a fire regime. Either they were from over the past 1,000 years, they were burned due to lightning strikes periodically, or they were burned by Native Americans for a variety of reasons, one of which was to attract wildlife, others were for warfare and things of that nature. But the fact of the matter is that this area burned, or areas like this burn probably. Some of the research says, on anywhere from a frequency of 2 years to 5 years. So these plants evolved with fire, and so they're very fire adapted. One of the reasons we see a lot of cedar encroachment now is because fire's been eliminated from the landscape. Okay, so we've always had cedar, but it was in places that weren't susceptible to fire. So like in draws or something like that, we had cedars, which were a natural component of the landscape. But now that fire's been removed, since in all of our infinite wisdom, we've eliminated fire from most of the landscape, we see cedar encroachment going everywhere. So you can drive up I-35 and see cedar going crazy everywhere. So that's because we don't have fire there. So cedar in particular is not fire adapted. So it's one of those plants that when we remove fire from the system, it just went crazy. So anyway, why is fire such an important thing? What does it do? What does it do for to the landscape that is important for wildlife? How does it impact the landscape? So what does it do to plants? It either impacts the plant composition, so the plant community, what type of plants there are. It impacts the structure of the plants, the size of the plants, the rankness of the plants, and it impacts the quality of the plants. Okay, so how nutritious are the plants for consumption to a variety of different herbivores, or whether or not it created enough bare ground or a plant community that was conducive to a good insect population that young grassland type birds like bobwhite quail might utilize, or wild turkey or whatever, for growing broods of quail or turkey. So it impacts all of those things. So Russell had mentioned that when I'd said one thing to sum it up was diversity. So let's talk about diversity a little bit. This area, he said, has been burned for the last 10 years in January, okay? And this area is burned kind of not every year, but about every 2 or 3 years probably. growing season burn, I guess. This one and this one is not. So which of these three do you think has the greatest plant diversity? If you're just looking out across there, what do you think? Okay, so I'd say that one's pretty diverse as well. Okay, but this one certainly is more diverse than this one. Why do you think that might be? Any takers? This one's been burned the same time every year for the last.
It's got a longer interval between burns.
Well, it has longer. This one has a longer interval between burns, but this has been burned. This has been burned in January for 10 successive years. Okay, so what's that going to do to the plant community? If you look out there, you see very many forbs out there. Forbs, broadleaf herbaceous plants. It's kind of eliminated forbs from that system, okay? And that's because burning it at the same time of the year, every year, has put those forbs at a competitive disadvantage to those grasses, okay?
If you're a livestock producer with no wildlife goals, hint, hint.
Yeah, that might be what you want. That's what they do in the Osage. That's what they do up in Osage County in the Flint Hills, is they burn the same time of the year, year after year after year. Okay, but that's questionable, I guess, whether or not you want to remove those forbs from that plant community, because they do offer some utility to livestock as well, though. So this one has been burned periodically. So you have a lot higher forb component in this one. And this one over here, you have a lot of diversity, but it's rank. Okay, it's just not. It's old growth, a lot of old growth, a lot of thatch buildup. So a lot of things that are unavailable to wildlife. So you may have a lot of greenbrier over here in this unburned area, but it's up here and it's old woody rank growth. Whereas if you were to run a fire through that and knock it down and get that regrowth, it's more palatable, higher quality. So in fact, if say greenbrier, for instance, is a very high quality white-tailed deer food, okay? So, but when it's up and old and rank and stuff, they don't use it. Cattle won't use it. So, but if you burn it, you get that regrowth and make it available to them. They will hammer it, and it's got 25, 27, 28% crude protein content. Cattle will use it, deer will use it, so rabbits will use it, whatever. But when you have these big mottes of just old, decadent greenbrier, then they don't use it. It's pretty much unavailable for anything. It's pretty much a desert. So quality of the vegetation, or quality of the forage, is a big thing that's impacted by the use of fire. So
while you're thinking, I want to back up on when I said hint, hint. You know, the time of the year that you can burn there's times of the year you can burn the favor grasses and times of the year that you can increase forbs, and so the balance is there. I'm like Ken. I mean, that might be a little too much, but livestock are going to get a big giant value out of this right here behind us too, because they're going to eat a lot of those forbs, or what everybody calls weeds, as well as the grasses.
So the purpose of leaving this like it is and not burning on a schedule is for sanctuary, for bedding of white-tailed deer, or what? I mean,
just lack of ability to do that, lack of manpower, lack of being able to get to it. I think the last time that was burned, I was working for the Noble Foundation in 2005, and we burned that. And that was the last time that it was burned. So
leave it so we can see the difference, right?
Well, maybe. No, we're here so you can see the difference, but I don't think it was left so you could see the difference. It's opportunistic, but yeah, I mean that needs to be burned, but realize that burning that now is not going to take care of those eastern red cedars there, because those eastern red cedars are out of reach of a fire. Okay, so unless you were to burn that in a wildfire catastrophic conditions or apocalyptic conditions, when you had 10% relative humidity and 30-mile-an-hour winds, you're not going to impact those big eastern red cedars like that. So, and with a prescribed fire, because we're not that stupid to set one under those conditions. So, at least I'm not. So we want to set something that's controllable. So that's why you want to get them when they're 5 feet and less, and you have good herbaceous plant community that you can burn. It will take care of those eastern red cedars that are 5 feet and less. But when they start getting above 5 feet, it's pretty sporadic whether or not you get them or not. So go ahead.
When is a better time of year to burn cedars that are taller? Is there summer?
Well, cedars like this, the way to control, the only way that you're going to really control those in a safe fashion is to go in and mechanically remove those, shear them or whatever, get them on the ground and then burn. Okay, so
Cedars in general.
Yeah.
Cedars in general. What's the best he's asking?
Oh, when to do cedars in general?
For the cedar control.
Well, cedar control actually summer burns in August and September have been shown to be more effective in woody plant control than earlier burns. But cedars in general, if you have a good enough fuel load, a heavy enough fuel load, you can control those even with the dormant season burn, but not so much your resprouting species like oaks and elms and things of that nature, where that a growing season burn would actually, a late growing season burn would actually be a little more effective for those. And that's things that, and when we're talking cedars below 5 feet, because unless you have enough fuel to get that cedar or that fire up into the canopy of the cedar, you're not going to impact. And if you look at those big cedars, what they have a tendency to do is they shade out all of the herbaceous material around them, and so you don't have that herbaceous material underneath there, so a fire go right up to the edge of that cedar and just fall off.
And for the woody plant control, really, and I'm not saying this to be facetious, but anytime you can burn during the year, I'd try to burn, even if it weren't my best time, because if I'm targeting September to burn to control eastern red cedars, well, I've got 30 days that I'm looking at. Well, there can be all kinds of things knock me out of burning for that 30 days. Then next year, okay, I get it done then. Well, you don't get it done. The next year, I don't get it done. Yeah. By then, your cedars are this big. Right. So at least burning now, you're gonna control some of them.
Yeah, if somebody asks me when's the best time to burn, there may be some nuances that there's a better time to burn to promote grass growth, or a better time to promote forb growth, or a better time for woody plant control. But the fact of the matter is that any burn's better than no burn at all. Okay, so and what I would do for wildlife purposes, we like to say that patchy burns, not patch burning, but patchy burns are more conducive to wildlife habitat, meaning that you don't actually go in and just scald off an entire area, just turn the entire area black. Okay, well, the way that happens is you have some discontinuity in the fuel load, and so some areas burn and some areas don't, so you get kind of a patchwork within the burn. So that's good for wildlife. Or if you have I think in the last group we had a guy ask something about if you had 500 acres versus 40 acres. Well, if I had 500 acres and I was going to do a burning program, I'd burn 100 acres maybe in a dormant season burn and 100 acres in a growing season burn, and then not burn the other 300 acres until next year. I'd burn another 100 acres and just kind of move it around and change the timing of the burn. And say if you were on a 3-year burn rotation, the next time I came back to this same place, I'd burned it dormant season last time, I'd burn it during the growing season this time, and I just kind of move it around. And that's from a you know, if wildlife was one of your goals. There are people that say, well, you can't burn during the nesting season because we're concerned with grassland birds. So don't burn during the nesting seasons of those grassland birds. But if the reality of the situation is burning that actually, you know, you may sacrifice 1 or 2 nests out there, but the greater good for years to come is far greater than just sacrifice what you would get from those 1 or 2 nests. So I think Russell mentioned that, so you avoid burning during certain times of the year. Well, you could figure out a time of the year to avoid burning for everything, okay? And then you end up with something like this. So what have you gained? You're going backwards. So,
Plus you don't burn every square inch.
and plus you don't, you don't burn every square inch of it, so you're not necessarily going to negatively impact something. So I'll go back, I'll stick with the thing, if you have the opportunity to burn it, you have the fuel to burn it, and you can get it burned, well then I'd burn it rather than say, oh, well, I'll wait another 2 months, because in 2 months, you may not get the opportunity to burn it, you know?
The flip side of that is that you also increase the quality of habitat for a lot of poults and younger birds and stuff, because if you have some burn ground going into the springtime, even into the summer, you get a larger forb component or weeds in those areas, and when you have those forb components, then you're going to have a lot more insects. You got more bare ground, you're going to have a lot more insects. You're not going to have near the insects in that than what you're going to have in that coming up this summer. And so insects are high protein, and for quail poults, turkey poults, a lot of other grassland bird poults, that's critical to them for their survival in their first few months.
But the fact of the matter is that if you can burn, if you have the opportunity to burn, conditions are right to burn, it's best to go ahead and burn. So, and not really try to micromanage that, because historically fires happened throughout the year. I mean, and think of it, I mean, a lot of people think, well, these dormant season burns are the way to go, but in reality, you know, those fires happen throughout the growing season. Say, you know, what happens here in August? Most of the time, most of the years, it's hot, it's dry. Even your newest growth, your growth of the year, is dry enough to burn. Okay, and so that's when you get thunderstorms and stuff. So that's when you had lightning strike burns. So you know, trying to avoid certain seasons because of little nuances of different critters. You know, typically you're not burning large enough acreages where you're going to you may negatively impact an individual, but you're not going to negatively impact a population.